Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, face up, or slip on your shoes and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps.
Hey everybody, Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 147 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. So episode 147, last week of June. So a year ago at this time, the last week of June was my last episode of season 7, I believe. And the first really year and a half, almost 2 years on my podcast, I went in seasons, and each season had a topic, and it was sort of a piece or a part of my life, and it followed along chronologically with my life. So one podcast led to the next, led to the next. This did two things. It made it very easy to plan the next podcast because I just went to the next phase I was talking about, and it guided my topics. And I remember having a meeting with my podcast editor at the time and thinking about what would we call season 8. I never really got around to it. I started having guests. I really branched out. And for the first 2 months of this calendar year, July 1st to June 30th, I had an incredible number of listeners. My listens went up quite a bit. And then the fall came and, people get busy and go back to work and all. And I really fell off push the podcast wagon because I was focusing on my book launch. And so my podcast listens have dropped dramatically. Well, they've gone back to sort of what they started out as. I can always manage between 400 and 600 downloads, which is enough to keep me motivated and focused. But if I'm not growing and I'm just stagnant, then I'm floating in the ocean. I'm not traveling the ocean, right? So here we are at the end of June, and I have a million ideas kind of swimming around in my head of what I'd like to do next with the podcast. But I do want it to become more listened to. And I think sometimes taking risks in a podcast can get people to listen because they can't believe you're saying these things. I don't really want to be sensational like that. I think I have a lot to share. I think I just need to focus a little more. So this leads me to today. And today is June 9th. You'll hear this, in 3 weeks from now. It was a pouring rainy day, freezing cold rain. We have had a string of sunny days, and hopefully when you're listening to this, I will be suntanned from track camp. It was a rainy, cold day, and I had a really tough day yesterday, and it was emotionally really draining. As you know from my emails and my themes, the month of May has not been the best. So 2024 has been tricky. I'm going to go back again and again to something I bring up a lot, and it's the concept of praying for something. When you pray for money, you don't just get money dropped on you. You get opportunities to earn money, right? Ways to make money. There's that story, sort of riddle, the story of a man on a roof in a typhoon, and the floodwaters have risen. He's trapped on his roof. And he's got, God, please save me. And a man comes by in a boat and says, here, get in. I'll take you to safety. And the man says, no, God's going to save me. I'm all set. Please, God, save me. And a man goes by in a canoe, and then a man comes by in a raft. And then the man is swept off the roof by the rising waters, and he drowns. When he gets to heaven, he says to God, I prayed for you to save me. Why didn't you save me? And God said, I sent you 3 boats. Sometimes what we pray for, we don't see that we're getting what we're praying for. I use the patience example. When you pray for patience, you don't get blanketed with patience, right? You get put into situations that require you to use patience. And that's how you become patient. So I have prayed and tried to reschedule and try to work around my sort of current lifestyle and, setup here that appears to prohibit me from ever really putting together a schedule that I can stick to. Now, this is likely my own weaknesses. Yes. I get angry and I get upset. I get frustrated. The more I pray for organization, the more unorganized my life feels until I sort of start to realize that maybe these are all my opportunities to sit down and take a look at it and restructure and do things differently myself. The other saying that comes to mind a lot for me lately is, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I will say I have restructured my schedule 80 gazillion times. Keep thinking this time it'll work, this time it'll work. And even though it's a different schedule restructure, it's not working. So I don't quite know what I'm doing over and over again and what I need to change. I have to really think about that. But I do know that, filling out a Google Calendar only works if I can actually do what I put in the Google Calendar. And sometimes I know my week ahead, I plan it all out with what I want to happen, knowing that a lot of what I'm putting in there can't. And so now am I just reinforcing failure? I don't know. So anyway, I went to bed last night after a pretty frustrating day, a really frustrating day. More of a heartbreaking day, quite honestly. I will say I make great efforts to communicate and share what I'm doing and, just share all these things. I had wonderful conversations with Kenny and with Gracie around all of these things and, just my frustrations and all of this. And we all need to have time in our lives to take care of ourselves. And, Gracie is very good at making sure she spends time with her friends and has downtime. I'm proud of her for that. She's at a time in her life where she can do it, right? And I will say that, and I mentioned this in my third space podcast episode, that Kenny doesn't do a lot of third space activities. His entire life really is his family because he doesn't work anymore. He works around the house, but I don't think he holds that into high esteem because not much gets done. He's a putzer and he'll just go back and sort of do the daily chores and then think my work here is done. As we sit in an unpainted shamble of a home, trying to finish things up. Anyway, we talked about ways to have third space activities. And so I'm hoping that, maybe by structuring a schedule for Kenny, that will make more structure for me. So I went to bed last night, very, very discouraged and sad. And so Jack was on his tablet and really drowsy and he fell asleep relatively quickly. And I was not at all tired at that time. And so I thought, well, I want to watch a movie. So I put on The Notebook. I haven't watched that from start to finish in a long time. I am one of those people that when I have a memory trigger, when I see something and I go right back to where I was when I first saw the movie or read the book or who I was with, what my life was like. In this movie, The Notebook came out in 2004. The book was written in 1996, and the author is Nicholas Sparks. I'm sure most of you know exactly what I'm talking about and who I'm talking about, but for those of you who don't, The Notebook is an incredible love story, and it spans a lifetime of this couple, Noah and Allie. It's, prior to World War II, that's sort of when they're young. Noah is a hardworking lumber guy. He builds furniture. He's a carpenter. Not a lot of money, not a lot of education, but brilliant and talented. And Allie is the snobbiest of the snobby, going off to a girls' school in upstate New York. They meet and fall in love. It's a summer romance. And what you see in the movie is that summer romance, and then the years that go by after the summer romance has ended, and the two sides, what Allie is doing and what Noah is doing, and then they reconnect. And they go through this tumultuous weekend of, should we be together forever or should Allie go back and marry her fiance? And it's this incredible love story. But it isn't told necessarily chronologically. The movie starts in an old folks' home, a nursing home, and there's a woman with dementia, and this man reading a book to her. He's reading a notebook. It's The Notebook. And Allie is the old woman, and she has dementia. She can't remember. She has Alzheimer's. And he reads their love story. And every time he reads it to her, she'll remember for a period of time, sometimes for a few hours, sometimes for only a couple of minutes. When she snaps in and realizes, oh my God, Noah, you're Noah. He goes by the name Buck, I think, in the nursing home so as not to confuse her. The movie goes back and forth with him reading the story. He starts to read, and then it just goes into the movie becomes what he's reading. You don't hear his voice narrate it. Some of it's narrated. So what you're getting is two love stories at the same time, their beginning and their end. And in the entire movie and book, you never, ever know what their actual life was like. You don't see wedding pictures. You don't see them having children and living their entire 35 or 40 years together. You don't see it. You see reminiscing of when they met and fell in love, and you see the end. I remember the movie was all the rage. And I remember seeing it in the movie theater and just being like, ugh, like just sobbing and sobbing, right? It was one of those movies that makes you cry. Everybody saw it. I believe it was like a Concord High School girls cross country connection movie. And so that was the early 2000s when the movie came out. The book came out prior to that. So the movie came out in 2004. And in 2005, end of 2005, I flew to Nashville, Tennessee with Allie Connolly and her mother, Patty. Allie was a runner for me. I was coaching her at Concord High School at the time, and she was looking at the University of Memphis. And so we all went down. I went down with Patty and Allie. And so I booked my ticket separate from them, so we weren't sitting together on the plane. So we get to the airport, and I see the book, The Notebook. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just seen this movie. I'm going to get the book. And I got the book. And I read it in the airplane from Boston to Memphis. We had a layover. I read the whole book. I was able to finish it. It gutted me. I was crying so uncontrollably that the flight attendant was concerned for me. Like, ma'am, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I just read this book from start to finish. I shouldn't have. Like it was one of those visceral reactions that I can't really wrap my head around. I don't know why it gutted me like that, but it did. And I've had a handful of those reactions. The Bridge to Terabithia did that to me. That book had gutted me. And that was for a number of different reasons. But there was another book about a mother who had quadruplets, and her ex-husband hired her to be murdered. And she was stabbed to death in front of her 4 kids. And I remember being a mess for days about that. So obviously these are traumatic books, right? The Notebook is a traumatic love story. It's beautiful. They fall in love. They're forced apart. They're apart for several years. You think maybe they're never going to get back together. They meet and they realize they're meant to be together. And then at the end of the movie, and I'm going to give it away just because it's been out for 20 years and it doesn't really spoil it to know how it ends. When she begins to lose her memory, she lives in a nursing home and he moves into the nursing home as well, even though she doesn't remember most of the time that he's her husband, because she's his sweetie and he's going to stay with her. He insists that he stay with her, and their children don't understand. She doesn't remember you, but he remembers her, you know? And so I remember at the time, you know, this movie came out right around the time Molly was born. It just struck me that things had beginnings and ends and beginnings and ends. And sometimes interference worked and sometimes it didn't, but it gutted me. The story just, you know, reached a part of my soul that was unbelievably intense. For the most of the trip, if I thought about the book, I started to cry. So the trip to Memphis was wonderful. And we came home and there you go. That's that. I'm watching it last night. I'm watching it on TV in my room. And so many things come back to me now that I've lost my job, now that Allie and him, for whatever reason, hates me, like horrible, dirty looks in public. She was at the race I timed today and actively avoids being anywhere near me. I don't know. It's bizarre. We had a workable relationship. You know, her father was the principal of the high school. So there's all of that job loss. Could be more. I don't know. But I do know that that's a hole for me. That's a heart wrench because I spent hours with her. And, you know, when everything went down in losing my job, and I just said, you're going to hear bad things about me. Please remember the Barb that you know. And her last typewritten words to me there were, I love you, Barbie. And so I wrote back, I love you too, Allie. And I unfriended her. I felt that it was in her best interest not to feel like she had to be Facebook friends with me because I didn't want her to feel like she was defying her father, family first. I was doing what I thought was the right thing. And I still think it was the right thing. Why did I want to watch this movie now? Well, I think a couple of things. I'm always processing Molly and her death and how do I move on and move along. And in the process, we've just hit 8 years. So we're in year 9 now. That's a long time. When Molly was in her 9th year of life, I felt like she'd been my child forever. You know, she only had 2 more years at her elementary school. Like, she only had 4 more years to live. So 9 years now, 8 years now, we've been without Molly. We're starting year 9. The cross-country coaching job is open at Concord High School. So for whatever reason, Allie isn't coaching. So I want to apply for it. And as a school board member, you're not allowed to work for the district. But if I could coach cross-country at Concord High School, I'd resign from the school board in a heartbeat. And sorry, everybody, but I love coaching runners a lot more than I like dealing with snotty adults. That's been on my mind. The moving on from Molly, and when do we let go, and what do we not let go of, and what do we keep, and how do we manage loss and change, right? So all of these things are just ruminating. Couple that with 2 really rough weeks where I'm just putting everyone else first because I don't know why. Maybe it's because I don't want to succeed. I don't know. But I watched the movie. So many things came up in regard to Molly. So there's the time connection. I'm watching the movie. I am immediately transported back to all my time with Allie Conley and her mom and how many wonderful years I had in that reality. Teaching at Walker, then teaching at Concord High School, after having Molly. The Conley family moved to Concord when I was pregnant with Molly. And Gene stopped teaching at Concord High School. Being the principal, the year Molly died. So he really had 14 years there because the pregnancy year he was there. So there's that connection. And so watching the movie brings me back into being the coach of runners. Then I wake up and I go time a road race and she's at it. So there's that weird connection, right? Some of the actions of her mother. So in the movie, her mother is the one that's truly against this boy. He's trash. He's nothing. Really trying to paint an ugly picture of Noah so that Allie will fall out of love with him. When 7 years later, when Allie sees Noah in the newspaper and sees that he redid the house exactly like she'd asked him to do it, this beautiful house. She's upset and angry. And so she goes to see him. She just realizes, I have to figure this out. Of course, they spend 3 magical days making love, and he builds her a studio that he promised he'd build her, and she paints. She's just, what do I do now? And in the process of dealing with her mother drives up to Seabrook, the town, to confront her and say, what are you doing? Get dressed, get out of here. And Allie's furious with her, but they spend a drive. And during the drive, 2 things happen. One thing is Noah had written to Allie every day for a year, and the mother had hidden the letters. So in one of their fights, initially, Allie said to Noah, why didn't you ever come get me? Why didn't you reach out? And he says, I wrote to you every day. I wrote to you every day for a year. The mother takes Allie to like a coal yard, and you see this guy shoveling wood chips or coal into a oven, like a burner. And Allie's like, who is that? And the mother points out this guy, and she talks about the summer she was 17, just like Allie, and that she fell in love with him, and that she loved him so much, and that they ran away together, and her parents called the police and separated them, her grandfather with all the money. And the man she married is this really wealthy, rich guy, equivalent to the fiance of Allie at this time, Lon, big money. And you can see in all the little movie scenes with Allie and her fiance, the mother and father are so excited. Yes, we're rich, we're popular, we fit in, all that upper crusty stuff that can be so irritating to the regular folk, right? Basically what she says to Allie is, I come here sometimes and just watch him and think about what my life might have been. And so that in her heart of hearts, the mother's in love with the guy shoveling the coal. I mean, she does love her husband, and they've had Allie and had a wonderful life together. And she talks about how she feels like she's not worthy of him. But she says to Allie, just make sure you make the right choice. And she gives Allie all the letters back. So this connects to me with Molly and with all the mistakes I feel like I made with Roy and befriending Amy, and the mistakes I made with Robin even, and the charter school, and so many Doug, so many decisions I've made in my life that I feel contributed to her death. I hold myself accountable all the time for these things. And I go round and round, second guessing myself. And could I have done things differently? And what should I hold on to? And what should I treasure? And what should I let go of? And this movie is just such a beautiful example of sometimes you let go and sometimes you don't. And Allie and Noah let go of Allie. She never wrote back. Allie never really let go of Noah because it was unfinished for her. And it was finished for Noah in many ways. He just saw that she was engaged. That's when he really put his energy into the house. I think he hoped she would come back, but he was able to move on. And in his moving on, he remodeled this beautiful home. His father died. He grew. He found himself. He was okay. Allie was doing what her mother wanted her to do, right? Following the rules, going along. So I look at so many of the decisions right now, and I know this is going to be a weird connection, but I keep getting frustrated with my life because it's what I want, but it isn't what I want. And it's not as simple as, I should never have had a baby. I love having Jack. Putting together a life with him that works for me and accomplishes what I want has been my challenge. And I feel sometimes like I hold on to what I did before. Let's do it just the same. Jack will go to the same schools as Molly and Gracie. He'll do dance. And some of the things, I look at the things that are the same for him. And I think Jack will always be in dance and theater because I love those people. But I do not think I will send Jack to public school. I think I'm reading a book right now called The Teenage Liberation Handbook. It's about unschooling. Fascinating. I can't believe as an educator all these years, I've never really heard of unschooling. But again, another book recommend from my editor, and it was a good one. I'm about halfway through. And so we're going off to Bali in December through Boundless Life. I've talked about this before. So just making plans and structuring our life with these activities, I feel, is me putting down the shovel and stopping the digging. It's me not running into the wall thinking this time I'll get through it. It's me not doing the same thing again, trying different things and watching all of the decisions and the let goes and the hold ons in the notebook. I just feel like it's super parallel, like I was supposed to watch this movie. I'm at a real turning point. I'm at a turning point with the foundation. I'm at a turning point with this podcast and what is my sort of online reality. I'm at a turning point with my book. I paid all this money 6 weeks ago to do all of this book promoting, and I have done none of it. And it's easy for me to kick back and say, well, it's not my fault because I never have time. I don't have time. So am I supposed to keep trying to make time, or am I supposed to look at things differently? I feel like I'm at such a corner turn. By the time you hear this, I've got, 2.5 weeks ahead of me, which are primarily track camp. I'm having my foot operated on tomorrow, so I'll be sort of stuck at home for a week. I have some self-curiosity as to what decisions I'll come to. I don't know. I don't know what my life will bring, but I do know that I felt like I was supposed to talk about the parallels in that movie, The Notebook. Y'all should watch it again. The parallels with a love story. I mean, the biggest piece to me, actually, I can't complete the podcast without telling you the ending of the movie. So Noah finishes the book. He finishes The Notebook and she remembers for a bit and then she forgets. And then Noah has a heart attack and he gets rushed away and she's away from him. And you can tell that she's not right. She doesn't remember, but she remembers enough to know she's forgetting something in that horrible limbo that people with Alzheimer's are in. And so you see all these scenes of them having to medicate her and sort of strap her into a bed so that she doesn't hurt herself. And she's sad and curious. And then finally he's back in his normal room and he's walking down the hallway in the middle of the night and he wants to go see her. And the nurse is like, no, I can't let you see her. I can't let you go see her. However, I'm going to get a cup of coffee. I'm not going to be back for a while, so I can't check on you. Basically, again, that sort of subtle permission. So he goes to her and he goes into the room that she's sleeping in. It's the middle of the night. He walks in and he looks at her and she opens her eyes and she says, Noah, is that you? And she remembers. And she's like, I thought I lost you. I thought you were never coming back. So she clearly had a lot of lucidity during the time he was gone. And maybe it was the trauma and the stress of him not reading to her every day. And he apologizes. And she asks him a question. She asks if he thinks that their love could produce miracles. And he says that it already has. And then she says, no, do you think our love could take us away together? Basically meaning, do you think we could die together? And he says, I think we could do anything. And then it's morning. You see the nurse walking down the hall. So you don't know what transpires next. And so the nurse opens the door to Allie's room and you see the look on her face and she walks over, I'll cry. And it's Allie and Noah on this little thin bed together, holding hands, two hands. And they're both dead. They've died together. It's this incredible ending to, when do you hold on and when do you let go? Look at me, I'm all crying. I'll never forget it because when you lose a child, there's so many times that you wish you died with your child. I think it would have been amazing to die with Molly. Of course, I'm not elderly and leaving behind grown children. I would have left Gracie and she would have lost her mother and her sister. And I would never want that for her. But the beauty in that scene, and I remember how much it gutted me at the time that they got to die together, holding hands, that they died together. And then the movie ends, so there's no reconciliation. You don't ever see what their life was like. You don't know what their children's reactions will be. You don't know any of those things. All you know is that they met at a carnival in like 1939 and fell in love and they separated for 7 years and got back together and stayed together forever and died in a bed holding hands. I think the message of the movie for me is that sometimes I have to let go of things, items, ideas, concepts, beliefs. And sometimes holding on is the exact right thing to do. And Allie and Noah had to let go and hold on more than once. They let go of each other. They got back together. His children really wanted him to leave her at the home and that she wouldn't know the difference, but he would know the difference. And sometimes when I'm asked by people, don't you think you should let go of that? Or don't you think you should move on? Or you're still sad about that? Well, yeah, because I'm still here going through it. It doesn't change for me. I haven't forgotten anything. It's the end of June. I have all of these things going on in my life. I'm at a corner turn. Do I stay in the nursing home with my dementia spouse or do I leave him there and go? And if I stay, how do I create a life that's meaningful and doesn't matter? Do I do things the same or do I make drastic changes? Do I let go of ideas that I thought were what I wanted and create new ones? What do I do? Do I continue to talk about my so-called life or do I talk about other things? Do I write my next book? I have a couple of different ideas. Some of my connections aside from Allie Connolly are me foolishly believing in those around me. I think Allie's mother believed that being with rich people was the right thing for her daughter and that it was the right thing for her. She never fought it. She didn't go back for the man that she loved. And I think she subtly told Allie, don't make the mistake I made. And then Allie's children tell their dad, she doesn't remember you. Come home with us. We miss you. And he doesn't. He stays. He chooses to stay. So I just think sometimes holding on versus letting go is a serpentine wall that we travel throughout our whole lives, And when I look at, some of the friendships in my life that I've let go of and some that I continue to hold on to in my heart, I see a lot of similarities here as well. So that's it. It's the end of June. I have some big decisions to make, and I'm not going to project them out there until I have them in place for a bit. And so I think that's my mission for the next 2 weeks. So right now in my driveway is my sister Eleanor and my daughter Gracie playing with Jack. Kenny's at a party with all of his friends, having some third space time, which is good. He needs it. And I'm here trying to get as much stuff done as I can before my foot surgery in the morning. So anyway, be good to yourself. Watch a movie that makes you cry. Be good to someone else. Share the movie that makes you cry with somebody that you think would enjoy it. And as always, have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.